Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to take another look at our MATLAB IDE, and we're going to look at some additional features in the IDE or integrated development environment and how it relates to things like help. This video is part of a larger series of videos that are meant as somewhat of a primer on how to use MATLAB and the MATLAB IDE. This kind of assumes that you've had limited exposure to MATLAB, although hopefully, even if you've used MATLAB before, you'll pick up some useful tricks. So to begin with, what we want to do is we want to revisit the script that we saw in the earlier video, and that was just a very simple one that allowed for us to assign a couple of values to our variables A and B, and then use those variables and add them together to create a new variable C. And in the earlier video, we saw that we could simply either run the entire file, or we could simply highlight and then run the selected portion of the file. Either way, in the workspace, you ended up with some variables and some values. Now, what I'd like to do is I would like to take a second to modify our workspace. If you have not yet done so, you probably don't get the same columns that I have here. You'll notice here that in addition to name and value, I also have the size of the variable. The size of the variable just indicates how many elements are in the variable. When we start dealing with vectors and arrays, you'll discover that certain types of variables can have multiple values in them. But more importantly, you want to make sure that you also see the class. And in order to do that, you simply just right-click, and you can have a little more control over what columns or what information are available for each of your variables. And so you'll see here that I have selected the class, the size, the name, and the value are sort of the default. And you can see there are some other ones that you may consider having. Now, I have not found a tremendous use for the other ones, but again, your application may change. But those four are, generally speaking, the four that you wish to have selected, because you'll oftentimes want to refer to the class or the type of the variable, especially as you start getting into more sophisticated MATLAB scripts. The other thing to note here with MATLAB is MATLAB will let you get away with a lot of things. In other words, you can do silly things on accident by just simply changing the variable type. In this case right here, I'm now going to say A is equal to 1 in single quotes, which sets it up to be an individual character. And sure enough, I have changed now the data type associated with A. Again, this is why it's very important to simply go ahead and have the class selected in the workspace. So the other thing that I wanted to cover in this video was the help. And so in order to launch the help, you've got a couple of different possibilities here. You can, of course, go to the home menu, and you can pull down the drop down, look at the documentation, the support website, and so on. But I am not a big fan of menus, and it's just simply because it takes a little longer for you to be able to constantly go up to a menu bar. Much rather, I'd like for you to see the other options associated with the help. And to be able to do that, the first thing that we want to do is get something that we need to get help on. And so let's pretend for just a second that we wish to figure out what features MATLAB has with respect to its random number generation capabilities. And so let's say, for instance, I think I know that there is a function starting with the letters R, A, and N, essentially rand I or rand n, and even rand perm, but I don't know what they are. And so what I can do is I can start by typing just the first few letters of the function. You can see this MATLAB interactive help will pop up some suggestions based on not only what I've used in the past, but also what features are available to your MATLAB installation. And you can see here that I am pulling up, in addition to the rank function, I've got my rand, rand I, rand n, and rand perm. But at this point, we have absolutely no idea how to use them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the rand function for this particular example. I'm going to go ahead and hit tab to let me auto-complete it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to hit F1. Now, the first time that you pull up the MATLAB help, it is going to take a little longer. So I would encourage you to almost do this every time you launch MATLAB, because it is, again, the first time, a little bit more of an expensive process. But you can see here that whatever function I'm interested in, by simply highlighting the function, hitting F1, I pull up the MATLAB help. Now, let's say, for instance, you're working on a single screen, or maybe that's not very convenient for you. There are technically two other ways that you can go about doing this. Let's say, for instance, that you know the name of the function. Well, you can simply just come down here to the command window and type in help and then the function name. And what you'll get is sort of the old school man pages or manual pages from a Linux environment. In other words, basically a console equivalent to the interactive help that you would have gotten with F1. Similar examples, although they're not exactly the same, but fundamentally they still help you with the rand function. The third way to do this, of course, is just simply to go to the MathWorks website, which I'm going to go ahead and pull up real quick, because I want you to see then the pattern associated with the various functions or the various help functions in MATLAB. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start off with the same function in the search bar, the rand function, and you can see that it pulls up actually a lot of suggestions. We are going to focus on this first one here, the same rand function that we pulled up the interactive help in. And you'll notice that I get the exact same help that I would have gotten interactively. As a matter of fact, these are pretty much synchronized. In other words, if you take a look here, I'm going to go ahead and minimize this real quick. You'll see that it gives you the same overloads for the functions. In other words, it tells you all the different options for the input arguments, tells you the description. And then also down here at the bottom, after several examples, it gives you some recommendations as to other functions that you might be interested in. This is a fantastic way to start exploring MATLAB. Basically, if you're curious, just start looking at some of the other functions. Well, the good news is that you don't have to have MATLAB loaded in order to do this. And you can see here that I have the exact same help on the website, including all the exact same examples, where you can try this example much like you would interactively in MATLAB. But more importantly, you also see the same see also or recommendations at the bottom of the article. The last thing to point out real quick with respect to the help is that oftentimes it's useful to look at when a particular function was introduced in MATLAB. I just learned something new. As a matter of fact, in this particular video, is they seem to have added some additional functionality in the rand function, which is kind of curious. I'll play around with it a little bit. But the idea here is that sometimes the behavior of the function changes as MATLAB evolves. So it's important just to make sure that you're dealing with the most recent documentation associated with the function. And again, you can also see this back here in the interactive help. So that's about it for this particular video. And we will again take deeper dives into all of these topics, including the workspace, the command window, the help, and scripts in general. But as always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And thank you for watching.